Hello, this is Dr. Jason Munsell. It is the second week of our online Rhetoric of Tourism class. This recorded lecture is meant to accompany the Day 5 lesson plan or PowerPoint for June 10th, and it is covering Chapter 3 in our book, which is the chapter on the Jazz Museum in Harlem, the National Jazz Museum in Harlem by Gregory Clark. And if you thought this was a confusing chapter, yeah, me too. But in any case, in fact, I'm actually glad that this, the whole online stuff is a little bit messy, but I discovered just a few moments ago, I just got finished showering and everything like that. I ran my 3 miles a little bit earlier trying to find a slice in between all the rain, and I discovered I didn't have any deodorant left. It's all out, so I had to borrow from my wife. But shh, don't tell her. It's a secret. It's strong enough for a man, but made for a woman. And I smell delightful. So one of the things that I have noticed as I reflect on the first week is that there's lots of things that I'm asking you to do, and this is an intense experience. Any summer class is going to be intense, whether it is online or face-to-face. That is the nature of summer classes. But through various emails, I think I've confided to you, or well, confide is a good word, that I plan to be very, very flexible with the deadlines and everything like that. I've gotten several emails from you saying that you couldn't quite get to this and that, and that's cool. At the end of the day, I'm much more concerned with you engaging the material and learning the material instead of me being an ass about deadlines. That's really not my style. So you got all the stuff you got to read, tough reading. You need to, though you are not necessarily required to, watch my recorded lectures. You can look at the PowerPoints, but again, you're not necessarily required to, I suppose, but it would be very, very wise to do so. And then you need to email me reflections of your reading, summarizing your general, what you think are the main points or arguments from your reading. That is indeed required. That's for a grade. You need to tweet at least once some sort of reaction to a tour that you have done. So far you should have on Twitter at least one tweet that has reacted in some way to the State House grounds tour that you did online. Now, I notice a lot of you have not gotten there yet, so hopefully you will get there very soon. And remember, the Twitter stuff and the Tumblr stuff is meant more for your own reflections about your experiences. And then the Tumblr blog, you need to have at least one blog up for every tour, which describes some of the things that you saw through that virtual tour, or again, you could have gone there physically, or else, I put links to things all over the place. There's links in the PowerPoints to these places. There are links in the syllabus, but you might find other links that you think are more interesting. Go for it. I'm down with that. So you've got the emails that are required, the Twitter that's required, the Tumblr blogs that are required, the threaded discussions. Now I haven't gotten to the threaded discussions yet because I wanted to get this recorded lecture to you as soon as I could, and I plan on opening that first threaded discussion up so you can have more time, because I have gotten some emails from some of you saying that you're having some technical difficulties with that. That's meant to be a lot more. Well, that's meant to be the interaction that we have with one another instead of the Twitter stuff and the Tumblr stuff. Even though the Twitter and the Tumblr, all other people around the world can't possibly have access to that information. Threaded discussion is just us. And then, of course, the paper that I will talk about later, not in this particular recorded lecture. In short, it's a lot of stuff that you have to do. It is intense. I will be very flexible with the deadlines and everything like that, and I am happy to work with you as best as I can to make sure that you figure everything out and everything like that. But hopefully you will meet me halfway and try to do the reading and do stuff as diligently as you can. Keep up the Twitters and keep up with the Tumblrs. Keep up with emailing me and everything like that. So again, this is our second week. First week is always sort of trying to figure things out. So hopefully you got some stuff figured out, and also hopefully you realize that I sort of put a lot of reading up front, and so there's less reading actually this week. Only 2 chapters that you actually have to read this week, and one of which was this one on the rhetorical experience of the National Jazz Museum in Harlem, which again is tricky. And so I'm going to try to get through this pretty quickly. I'm already at 6 minutes. Hopefully this whole thing will be no longer than 20 minutes. The next slide, or the second slide after the beginning title slide, just sort of says some sort of key initial thoughts from the book, from the chapter 3. And this is a tough article. It's very theoretical, and the author mentions that this is going to be very theoretical. But really, maybe I'm not understanding it, but it doesn't seem all that tricky once you get past all the fancy language. And there's a lot of fancy language in there, and it's not written in a very clear way from my humble perspective. But you know, we're all about Dewey and Burke and Dewey, aesthetic and rhetoric, rhetoric and aesthetic, and experience, experience, experience. Those are some of the key terms of this particular chapter: aesthetic, rhetoric, and experience. And I'll say more about that later. The concerns of Dewey and Burke, generally speaking, theoretically, conceptually, on the bottom of page 113 and the top of page 114, I think is some important stuff to think about and to understand as you're trying to figure out what the heck Clarke is really all about. And basically, it says this: although the work of both range widely, Dewey and Burke can be read as concerned primarily with the powers of rhetoric to prompt people to such change. That is, change in attitude, change in identity, change, some sort of change. That concern seems rooted in the recognition that they shared that in the 20th century, the American democracy, with which each was fully identified, might not thrive or even survive. And both understood that democracy, to reach that democracy, the American democracy, to reach well beyond the realm of electoral politics, to encompass the project of sustaining community through the ongoing rhetorical work of influence. And this moves to the next bullet point. And so the idea here is that trying to build a sense of a shared community and trying to make sure that democracy survives, but realizing that influence is not just going to take shape within the very sort of strict political realm. You listening to speeches or watching the State of the Union address or blah, blah, blah. It happens all over the place. It happens in our everyday experiences. It talks about how, in a sense, and this is still in the first paragraph on top of page 14, in a democratic culture, some of this is public and even political work, but much of it is done informally and interpersonally. It occurs in the context of government, but we engage in most of our democratic work at home, on the job, at church, among neighbors, family, and friends. People talk about stuff at the local, barbecue. And so that's sort of what they're getting at. And so this is this larger idea, and again, this is the next bullet point, that rhetoric and is all over the place. cultural, civic influence is sort of all over the place. It's not just CNN. It's not just Fox. It's just not just MSNBC. It's not just WhiteHouse.gov. It is all over the place. It is at the BI-LO. It is at the Walmart. It is at the dollar store. It is at the flea market. That's where democracy lives, at the flea market. Okay, and then I'll get back to some of those complicated ideas from Dewey and Burke. But the larger idea and the big picture is that experiences are rhetorical. That is, oftentimes we think about a text, whether it be a speech or a movie or a cartoon or a commercial about the new delicious Hardee's burger. But experience itself, I suppose, can be a text. So we're talking about us as human beings walking through a museum or engaging some sort of aesthetic thing, whatever it might be, and that experience prompting some sort of new thought about something, and that thought perhaps prompting a new identity and helping us to create some sort of new shared sense of community, if that makes any sense whatsoever. So it's a little bit different. It's broadening up again our idea of rhetoric. The next slide here, what Gregory Clark is after in his essay or his chapter. Page 114 has this sort of function statement, and basically he's saying that he's following Dewey and Burke to try to offer a sort of a new theoretical lens or new way of thinking about rhetoric, or a new way of thinking about experiences, and basically that experiences are rhetorical. That's it. And that's sort of the next bullet point. He's not really all about studying a particular place per se, because the Jazz Museum, the National Jazz Museum, is sort of all over the place. But he's much more concerned with the overarching experience. And this is where it gets sort of tricky. He labels that experience as aesthetic. And aesthetic, I mean, you can go Google aesthetic. You can go look at Wikipedia or something like that. Basically, aesthetic can be boiled down as the perception of something as pleasing or beautiful or in some ways like, yeah, that's cool. For instance, when I was actually, I put this on the PowerPoint, when I was writing this morning, I was indeed listening to Latin jazz and drinking Starbucks coffee. It was an aesthetic experience. I don't know what I got out of it, but it was cool. And any sort of aesthetic experience is rhetorical because it influences. And of course, Clark is much more interested in not, sitting, I guess, at my own desk in my home, drinking coffee and listening to Latin jazz that I found on iTunes and writing a PowerPoint. He's much more invested in, again, these memory places, but here in this case it's sort of all over the place because it has workshops and all that type of stuff. But that experience, that aesthetic experience, finding something pleasing and it impacting you in some sort of way, that's a rhetorical process because it influences. And then of course what Clark does is offer a preview of his essay on page 114 at the bottom. He talks about the three parts. First he's going to outline this big old long theory stuff, then he's going to apply it to the National Jazz Museum of Harlem or in Harlem, and then he's going to offer these rhetorical lessons. Next slide, slide 4, getting down with Dewey, getting on our boogie with Burke. So Dewey's all about experience and shared experience, but again, what is an experience? And again, we try to get all, experience is an experience. God, it's not that tough. But try to get, all sort of fancy. Dewey calls it a moment of consummation. When a person has some unitary impression that is felt in reaction to something and that consummation